The late afternoon sun cast slanted beams of light through the small attic window, illuminating swirls of dust and half-forgotten keepsakes stacked high on wooden shelves. Jenna wrinkled her nose at the stale air as she shifted old boxes aside, searching for a misplaced family photo album her mom had asked her to bring down. The attic had always been a place of mystery to Jenna, a dusty, treasure-filled hideaway where each box seemed to hold secrets of lives long past. But her fingers brushed against something unexpected. A small, well-worn leather book wedged between two larger boxes. Intrigued, she gently pulled it free, surprised by how heavy it felt in her hands. The cover was cracked with age, the leather peeling slightly at the edges, but the intricate golden letters on the front were still visible. She squinted, tilting the book into the light. Journal of Emma Grace. Jenna's heart gave a small, surprised jolt. Emma Grace. She had heard that name only a few times growing up, a whispered part of her past, spoken with reverence and curiosity. Emma Grace was her biological mother, a shadowy figure who had entered her life only in stories and faint memories, leaving as silently as she'd arrived. Her adoptive family had been loving, giving her a life full of support, understanding, and everything she'd ever needed. But deep down, Jenna had always felt a strange tug, a quiet call from a part of her she didn't quite know. For a moment, Jenna hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the clasp, her mind racing with questions she had barely dared to voice. Who had her mother really been? What dreams had she held? What pain had she known? She knew, somehow, that opening this diary might change her view of everything, including herself. With a trembling hand, she lifted the fragile cover and flipped to the first page. The pages were yellowed, soft to the touch. Jenna traced the slanted, graceful handwriting with her fingers, feeling a strange sense of intimacy and reverence. Her mother's words leaped off the page, detailing moments of joy, small victories, and her dreams of becoming a renowned pianist. She wrote about her first piano recital, the joy she felt when her fingers danced across the keys, the way she lost herself in music as if it were a language only she could understand. Jenna read slowly, savoring every word. She could almost see her mother sitting in a quiet room, pouring her thoughts onto the pages, finding solace in the act of writing. She pictured her mother as a young woman, full of hope and passion, immersed in music and the beauty it brought to her life. But as Jenna turned the pages, a subtle shift emerged in the writing. The light-hearted entries grew sparse, replaced by words that felt heavy, burdened with an invisible weight. Her mother's once hopeful voice began to reveal traces of sorrow and struggle. She wrote about long hours, high expectations, and the isolation that came with her relentless pursuit of success. Jenna felt a pang of sadness, imagining the loneliness her mother must have felt, torn between her dreams and the harsh realities that surrounded her. The entries hinted at a looming darkness, an unspoken trauma that Jenna sensed but could not yet understand. Closing the diary for a moment, Jenna stared at the cover, lost in thought. She had always held an idealized image of her birth mother, a beautiful, talented woman who had loved her deeply but, for some unknown reason, had been unable to stay. Now, confronted with these pages, Jenna felt her perceptions unravel. Her mother was no longer an idea but a person, a woman with dreams and flaws, laughter and tears. She was someone who had loved fiercely but had also known great pain. Jenna let out a shaky breath. She had always felt a quiet ache, a gap in her life she couldn't quite fill, as if part of her were missing. Now, reading these pages, she felt a tentative connection to the woman who had once held her, even if only briefly. She wondered what it would have been like to know her mother's voice, her laughter, to see her smile. With a reverent hand, she brushed the dust from the cover and closed the diary carefully. She knew there were more pages, more secrets waiting to be uncovered, and the weight of the discovery pressed heavily on her chest. The attic seemed to grow colder as evening shadows deepened, but Jenna remained still, holding the diary as if it were a fragile relic from a forgotten past. It was both a beginning and an ending. For the first time, Jenna felt close to her mother, as if they shared a bond transcending time and loss. And with that thought, she knew she couldn't leave the diary unread. This was her legacy, her story to explore. Taking the diary under her arm, she slowly descended the attic steps, feeling as if she were stepping out of one world and into another. The next evening, Jenna settled onto her bed, the old leather diary resting gently on her lap. The dim glow of her bedside lamp cast a warm light over the pages as she opened the diary again, this time feeling a quiet resolve. She wanted to know more, to understand the woman who had given her life but remained a mystery. As she traced her fingers over her mother's handwriting, Jenna felt as if she were stepping into a parallel world, a life she might have known had things been different. She began to read the entries with greater attention, letting herself become immersed in her mother's memories. The pages wove together the early days of her mother's life, her dreams of being a pianist, and the struggles she faced in a world that wasn't kind to sensitive souls. Her mother's words painted vivid pictures of concert halls, late-night rehearsals, and the quiet joy she found in the music she loved so deeply. It was as though Jenna could hear the faint strains of a piano playing somewhere far away, a melody that resonated with a piece of her heart. But as she read on, Jenna noticed that her mother's entries were slowly becoming more desperate, tinged with a sadness that lay just beneath the surface. Her mother had written about the long hours, the endless pressure to be perfect, and the crushing weight of expectations she faced from all directions. There were hints of a man, a teacher or perhaps a mentor, who seemed both encouraging and demanding, pushing her to a breaking point. Jenna's fingers tightened on the edges of the pages, a sense of unease settling over her. She thought of her own life, growing up in the safety and warmth of her adoptive family, shielded from harsh realities. Her adoptive mother, kind and devoted, had done her best to make Jenna feel wanted and loved. And though she knew her mother would be hurt by her fascination with this diary, Jenna couldn't ignore the pull she felt. This was her story too, one that lay hidden behind her adoptive family's kindness and security. As Jenna continued reading, her mother's entries became shorter, more hurried, as if written in stolen moments. She confessed to feeling trapped, torn between the life she had chosen and the one she longed for. A simple, quieter life, free from the relentless pressures of the music world. Jenna felt a pang of empathy for her mother, imagining the loneliness that must have accompanied those words. Her mother was vulnerable, grappling with dreams that seemed to slip further away with each passing day. The more Jenna read, the more she realized how alike they were. She saw glimpses of herself in her mother's dreams, in her love for the arts, and in her yearning for something deeper. Jenna had always loved music, though she'd never considered herself talented. She had often felt a strange connection to the piano her adoptive mother kept downstairs, playing only when the house was empty, letting the notes carry her into a world where she felt truly understood. A soft knock on her door jolted her from her thoughts. She looked up to see her adoptive mother standing in the doorway, her expression warm but cautious. "Hey, honey," her mother said softly, glancing at the diary on Jenna's lap. "I noticed you've been spending a lot of time with that. Are you okay?" Jenna hesitated, unsure how to explain the depth of her feelings. "Yeah, Mom," she replied quietly, feeling a small weight in her chest. "It's hard to explain. I just feel like I'm learning so much about her, and in a way about myself too." Her mother nodded, stepping further into the room. "I understand, sweetheart. I just don't want you to lose sight of everything you already have here, with us." "I know," Jenna replied, her voice tinged with both gratitude and a hint of defiance. She knew her mother loved her, but this journey felt essential, like something she had to experience alone. Her mother lingered for a moment, as if contemplating saying more, then gave Jenna's shoulder a reassuring squeeze before leaving her to her thoughts. Jenna stared after her, a knot of guilt twisting inside her. She didn't want her adoptive mother to feel left out or unappreciated. But something in this diary called to her, a voice from the past reaching out, urging her forward. As she returned her attention to the diary, Jenna resolved to finish reading, hoping to find answers. Not just about her mother, but about herself. The entries grew sparse toward the end of the section, hinting at a breaking point, a moment when her mother had to make an impossible decision. Jenna's eyes lingered on one line, hastily scrawled. Sometimes, love means letting go. The words hit her like a wave, stirring a well of emotions she couldn't name. It was becoming clear that whatever had led her mother to let her go wasn't a simple choice. It was a choice born out of sacrifice, a choice that Jenna couldn't fully understand, but one that resonated deeply. She closed the diary, her mind swirling with newfound respect and a bittersweet sadness. With her heart heavy yet strangely at peace, Jenna knew she couldn't stop here. Her mother's story was unfinished, and in some way so was her own. The following morning, Jenna woke up with a lingering feeling, as if she'd spent the night under a blanket of her mother's memories. Every detail from the diary had left an imprint on her, and her mind drifted back to her mother's passion for music. That quiet call seemed to pull her from within, urging her to reconnect with the past in a way she had never considered. After breakfast, Jenna wandered down the narrow hall toward the living room, where an old upright piano sat quietly against the wall. It was a piece her adoptive mother had inherited, a fixture that had been there her whole life. She'd played it occasionally, tapping out simple melodies as a child, but had never taken it seriously. The piano had been more of a comforting presence than a calling, until now. She approached the instrument, hesitating for a moment before lifting the wooden cover over the keys. The sight of the black and white keys, slightly yellowed from years of disuse, filled her with a strange sense of reverence. She reached out and pressed a single key. The note sounded pure and resonant, and for a moment, the house seemed to hold its breath. Jenna played another note, then another, letting her fingers drift over the keys in an unpracticed but instinctive way. She found herself closing her eyes, feeling the vibrations beneath her fingers, as though the piano were speaking to her in a language only her heart understood. The room filled with soft, halting notes, each one a piece of her mother's story and her own. As she played, Jenna could almost imagine her mother sitting beside her, guiding her hands, sharing in the music that had once been her whole world. The thought sent a shiver through her, and a warm tear slipped down her cheek. She was alone, yet somehow she wasn't. Her mother's presence felt close, as though the music were a bridge across time. Lost in the melody, Jenna didn't hear her adoptive mother enter the room. Startled, she looked up to see her mom standing in the doorway, watching with a tender but concerned expression. "I didn't know you still played," her mother said gently, her gaze soft but probing. Jenna gave a small shrug, brushing a tear away quickly. "I don't really. I just felt like playing today." Her mother nodded, stepping further into the room. She rested a hand on the edge of the piano, watching Jenna carefully. "I know this journey you're on means a lot to you, but I can't help worrying. I don't want you to lose yourself in something that might be painful." Jenna understood her mother's concern, but something inside her resisted. She felt like this connection to her mother, however faint, was something she'd been missing, something that defined a part of her she had only just begun to understand. "Mom, I can't explain it, but it feels like I'm getting to know her through this," Jenna said, her voice soft yet resolute. "Reading her words, playing this piano, it's almost like I'm understanding a piece of myself." Her adoptive mother's face softened as she nodded, though Jenna could still see the lingering worry in her eyes. "I understand, Jenna, and I want you to have this. Just promise me that you won't let it pull you away from the family you have here." "I won't," Jenna assured her, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the woman who had loved her unconditionally. She reached out and gave her mother's hand a gentle squeeze, a silent acknowledgement of the sacrifices she, too, had made. After her mother left, Jenna continued to play, her fingers finding a gentle rhythm, exploring melodies that felt both foreign and familiar. She lost herself in the music, imagining the life her mother must have led. A life filled with both beauty and pain. The piano's notes filled the room, creating a sanctuary where she could connect with the woman she had never met, but whose spirit she now felt so close. Hours slipped by unnoticed, each song a conversation with her mother. Jenna played until her fingers ached, until the sun was low in the sky, casting warm, golden light across the room. She finally closed the cover over the keys, feeling a sense of peace and quiet determination. Later that evening, Jenna returned to the diary, flipping through more entries that traced her mother's final days as a performer. Her mother's words reflected a growing sense of isolation, a feeling of being trapped between the demands of her career and the quiet, stable life she longed for. The image of her mother became clearer with every word, and Jenna felt as though she were witnessing a woman torn between two worlds. The entry that struck her the most was a short, almost hurried note scribbled in the margins. If only I could be free, to live for myself, and to be a mother to my child. Reading those words, Jenna felt a surge of emotion, as though a missing piece of her own heart had fallen into place. Her mother had wanted her, had dreamed of raising her, loving her, but life, in its cruel way, had forced her mother to choose between her dreams and her daughter's future. The realization left Jenna with a bittersweet ache, one that mingled regret with gratitude. Setting the diary aside, Jenna knew that her journey was far from over. Her mother's legacy was calling her, not just in words but in music. For the first time, Jenna felt a purpose, a sense of direction that gave meaning to the fragmented pieces of her life. She would honor her mother, not by living in the past, but by embracing the gift she had been given, a gift of music, love, and sacrifice. As Jenna prepared to sleep, she felt a quiet resolve. The piano was no longer just an object in her home. It was a way to continue her mother's story, and with that thought, she closed her eyes, knowing that tomorrow would be another step forward in her journey. A week later, Jenna found herself sitting backstage at a small community theater, her heart racing. She had spent days practicing, rehearsing the melody she had created, inspired by the pages of her mother's diary. The piece was an intimate tribute, a blend of her mother's favorite classical compositions with hints of her own unique style. The concert hall wasn't grand or crowded, just a modest space filled with friends, neighbors, and her family who had gathered in support. Jenna took a deep breath, feeling a wave of emotions settle over her. As she closed her eyes, she imagined her mother's presence in the room, the weight of her love, her sacrifice, and her pain. This performance wasn't just about music. It was about forgiveness, understanding, and connection. It was a bridge to a past she had never fully known but had come to embrace. Her adoptive mother's gentle hand touched her shoulder. "You're ready, Jenna. She'd be so proud of you." Jenna nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had chosen this night, this stage, as a way of letting go of the sadness that had bound her mother's life, releasing it into the beauty of music. With a final look at her mother's supportive face, Jenna stood, smoothed her dress, and stepped out onto the stage. The quiet murmur of the audience fell into silence as she approached the piano. She could feel every eye on her, every heartbeat in the room attuned to her as she sat, poised, fingers hovering above the keys. Jenna took a slow, steadying breath, her gaze drifting over the audience until it landed on her mother, who sat in the front row, her eyes filled with pride and unshed tears. The first note was soft, almost tentative, like the first words on a blank page. Jenna played with a gentleness that reflected her mother's early hopes, each note carrying the light-hearted joy and wonder her mother had once known. The melody flowed through her, unfurling in graceful waves, echoing the beauty of a life filled with dreams. But as she moved into the next passage, her fingers grew more deliberate, more intense. The music shifted, reflecting the darker parts of her mother's story. The pressures, the isolation, and the moments of anguish. Jenna poured herself into the piece, channeling her mother's struggles, her own grief, and the pain that had come from uncovering the past. Every note resonated with the complexity of emotions Jenna had experienced throughout her journey. The audience was captivated, their expressions somber, a few wiping tears as they listened. Jenna could feel their energy, their empathy, as if they too were sharing in her mother's story. She played through the pain, her fingers never faltering, transforming sorrow into something beautiful, something that her mother herself might have played if she'd had the chance. As the piece drew to its final notes, Jenna slowed, letting the music soften, each note becoming a whisper, a gentle goodbye. She closed her eyes, feeling the presence of her mother beside her, the connection between them stronger than ever. The final note lingered, hanging in the air, filled with the forgiveness she had found, both for her mother and for herself. For a moment, there was only silence, the kind that speaks volumes. Jenna opened her eyes, meeting the gaze of her adoptive mother, who was smiling through her tears. Then, the room erupted in applause, the sound filling the space, wrapping around Jenna like a warm embrace. Her heart swelled with gratitude, relief, and a profound sense of peace. She had done it, not just for herself, but for her mother, a final act of love and reconciliation. After the concert, Jenna was met with hugs, kind words, and tearful embraces from friends and neighbors. Each one congratulated her, some sharing memories of their own struggles, others expressing admiration for her courage. She felt a sense of belonging, a realization that her journey wasn't just personal but universal, a testament to the power of love and resilience. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, her adoptive mother came up to her, wrapping her arms around Jenna in a tight hug. "You were wonderful, Jenna. You played with such heart. I felt her there with us." Jenna leaned into her mother's embrace, feeling a flood of gratitude. "I felt her too, Mom." It was like she was finally at peace. Her mother smiled, brushing a tear from Jenna's cheek. "She would have been so proud of the woman you've become. You've given her story a voice she never had." Jenna nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The pain that had once seemed insurmountable now felt distant, transformed by her mother's memory and the music she had shared. She knew she would always carry her mother with her, but now, that memory was one of love, not sorrow. That night, Jenna returned home and sat by the piano once more, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys. She played a simple melody, a quiet tune just for herself, feeling the joy that came from embracing her own voice, her own legacy. She knew her mother's spirit would always guide her, a gentle reminder of the strength that comes from love, even in the face of hardship. Jenna's journey had come full circle, yet she sensed it was only the beginning. She had found her mother not just in the pages of an old diary, but in herself, in the courage to live fully and openly. And as she closed the piano lid for the night, Jenna knew her mother's legacy would live on, not as a shadow, but as a light that would guide her forward, one note at a time. Days after the concert, Jenna felt a quiet peace settle into her life. The performance had been more than an act of closure. It had unlocked something within her, allowing her to carry her mother's legacy with pride, free from the pain that had once haunted it. Sitting at the piano now felt like reconnecting with both the past and the future, a chance to build something meaningful on her own terms. One evening, Jenna's adoptive mother entered the room, carrying the old diary. She placed it gently beside Jenna on the piano. "You've honored her beautifully," she said. "Now, how do you plan to carry this forward?" Jenna looked down at the diary, feeling the weight of the question. For so long, she had thought of music as a way to find her mother, but now she saw it as a way to find herself. I think I want to pursue music," Jenna replied slowly, the idea forming as she spoke. Not to follow her footsteps exactly, but to use what she loved to create something of my own. Her mother smiled, nodding with understanding. She would have wanted that for you. From that moment, Jenna devoted herself to her music, crafting pieces that reflected her journey, a fusion of her mother's classical influences and her own emerging style. Each note she played felt like a bridge, connecting her to her mother's dreams and transforming them into her own. She performed locally, each concert an act of both remembrance and celebration, and soon she was recognized for her unique voice and style. In the following years, Jenna built a life grounded in her passion for music, teaching, and performing, using her experiences to inspire others. She found solace in her growing impact, sharing her mother's story with students, each lesson a reminder of resilience and the enduring strength of love. Every performance, every piece she composed, was a tribute to the past while standing firmly in her own present. In time, Jenna's life became a reflection of all the love that had shaped her. Her family remained her anchor, supporting her growth and celebrating her journey. And though her mother's diary now sat quietly on her bookshelf, Jenna knew its pages were alive in her heart, guiding her forward. If you enjoyed Jenna's journey of discovery and healing, make sure to check out more heartwarming stories on our channel. Click on the card to watch another tale that will touch your heart. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. I love reading your comments and thoughts. If you'd like, feel free to suggest themes for our upcoming videos. Thank you for watching. Take care.